Pretty big week for the Montreal Canadiens. No more Marc Bergevin, no more Trevor Timmins. Even Paul Wilson, the communications guy, is gone. Geoff Molson had to address questions from the media about who the next GM will be and what role Jeff Gorton will have in the organization. We're going to try to tackle all of that on this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. My name is Julian McKenzie, alongside our usual suspects. Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette is here. Rick Green, former Stanley Cup champion, is here. And Jessica Rusnak of CBC Daybreak Montreal is also here. We have to talk about Geoff Molson. We have to talk about the press conference he gave earlier this week to address a new change to come in management. Out with the old, in with the new. Jeff Gorton is the Senior Executive Vice President of Hockey Operations, which a lot of people are just saying it's just a fancy way of saying he's the GM, but there is supposed to be a replacement at the GM position. They want a bilingual candidate. So if you want to make it francophone, that's your wish, but they did emphasize they want a bilingual candidate. There's so many things we can take away from this press conference. I'll start with you, Jess. What were your takeaways from this press conference with Geoff Molson?
I think it was about time that Geoff Molson said that this team needs a fresh start. For the longest time, the problems have always been on the players, on the coaches, that the management were always given a pass with it. And two things that Geoff Molson mentioned that ultimately led to this firing is their drafting and also their development of players, two of their biggest problems. He mentioned in the span of 9 years, they had 2 third overall picks that are no longer on this team. And when you have a pick that high, they're supposed to be the kind of players that are able to turn the franchise around, and that hasn't been the case there. So I think for Geoff Molson, this move needed to come. They had to clean house. He knew whoever was coming in next was going to want to bring in their own people. Trevor Timmins has been with the organization for 17 years, and it just seems things have not been able to pan out. And now it's time to give it a fresh look for the Montreal Canadiens.
And, for a while now, too, I've been looking at the players, looking at their faces, looking at their emotion, looking at their interest. It hasn't been pretty. And they just looked like they were not interested in playing anymore, and they were waiting for something to happen. And I think that Geoff Molson obviously made a big statement in saying, listen, it's time for a change. We basically knew that Marc Bergevin was not going to be coming back. So he made the move to clean house, talk about the fresh start, get some people in place, and once Jeff Gorton comes in, he'll address some of the issues at that point. But I think that it doesn't come as any surprise. I know I've been there before. When your team is struggling like they've been struggling, everybody's waiting for something to happen. Usually it's the coach that goes down, but this time they're starting with the GM and the upper executives, and that's a start to changes to come, and really badly needed.
Geoff Molson really impressed me with his news conference. He was calm, cool, collected. He was prepared. He answered all the questions from everyone in the media. It made me wonder why, after the Logan Mailloux draft, he waited 5 days before addressing the media, and why he chose to select only selected media that allowed him ask him questions, because he handled himself very well. He was asked a lot of difficult questions. He answered them very well, impressively. He's going to take heat now, because however you want to look at it, Jeff Gorton is the general manager of the Montreal Canadiens right now. He is the guy in charge, and whoever they hire as the GM is going to be reporting to him. And I think Jeff Gorton's going to have the final say. They're not going to bring in an inexperienced GM, a francophone GM with no experience as an NHL GM, and have him overrule Jeff Gorton. Molson's already taken heat. The front page of the Journal de Montréal headline is an American running the Canadiens, with an English headline. Good luck, Mr. Gorton.
That's not the newspaper being represented here. Journal de Montréal is the Montreal Gazette.
It shows the kind of heat that Geoff Molson takes when he makes a decision like this. So, he sort of worked his way around to get the GM he wanted in place without giving him the title of GM. We'll see how that works out moving forward, and we'll see how that affects the candidates that might apply or might want to work under Gorton moving forward. But again, I just thought Geoff Molson handled himself really, really well, and it made me wonder why he didn't just do the same thing after the big controversy over the Logan Mailloux situation. He's a big boy, and he handled himself, I thought, really, really well, and answered every question. And as I said, calm, cool, and collected.
Maybe that's why Paul Wilson is no longer in the head of the communications there. Perhaps he advised him at that time to do that, and then it obviously backfired. And that was something that Geoff Molson mentioned in the press conference, was having a better communication from the team to the media to the fans, and that was kind of the reasoning behind making that shift in the communications department.
Yeah, there's no doubt, Jess, that Geoff Molson was receiving some very bad advice from PR for this team. I mean, the way they handled that Logan Mailloux situation was how they didn't have a damage control plan in place the second they drafted him. Like I've said in previous shows, it's not like they just had picked 26. They went, you know what, maybe we'll pick Logan Mailloux. They went into that draft knowing they were going to take him if he was available, and they had no plan for, like, they didn't expect the backlash, which is shocking. And even more shockingly is that they weren't prepared. But Geoff Molson was prepared for this news conference. As I said, he answered every question, calm, cool, collected, answered them well. And as I said, I thought it was impressive.
And his timing was now. I mean, I think that the move that he made at this point allows the new group that's going to be coming in a little bit of breathing room to, assess their personnel, come in and get a feel for the people. And, before the trading deadline, is going to have a little bit of wiggle room. And, obviously changes are going to happen. You just can't continue on this road. And Geoff Molson made the statement, say, listen, not good enough. Next, and life in the business.
Yeah, I mean, he had to do something. You're right, Rick. I mean, I wrote a column a week or so ago saying, when will enough be enough? Like, when will enough be enough of this team getting blown out, not able to win 2 games in a row, all the stuff that's going around the team, and enough finally became enough for Geoff Molson. And he couldn't go ahead with Marc Bergevin going into the trade deadline with a GM who's not going to be here next season. So now this gives Gorton time to find the GM. It gives him time that can work with him. As I said, Gorton, I think, is going to be the real GM. But it also gives him time to – he comes in with a fresh slate. It's great when you come from outside an organization because you don't have any attachment to anybody. You didn't sign Brendan Gallagher. You didn't sign Carey Price. You come in and you look at everybody. There's no emotional attachment with any of these players. So it's easier for him to come in and make tough decisions as opposed to somebody like Scott Mellenby, who's already been in the organization for years and has an attachment and a relationship with all these players. It's a lot easier when you come in from the outside, and you just do what you have to do. And you don't worry about feelings being hurt because you don't really have any personal relationship with these guys.
I want to move this to Rick. This next question I have, if you were Jeff Gorton, I know I ask you to put your coaching hat on every now and again. Let's see if you can be an exec for a moment. If you were Jeff Gorton, what's the first thing you're doing with the Montreal Canadiens?
Well, let's face it. They have to have a GM in place that's bilingual. So the restrictions there are somewhat more difficult than your normal organization, but that's fine. I mean, they can work with that. They're going to get him in place, and obviously of his choice, so that they are kind of talking the same language, so to speak, and trying to get a feel for just what their group is all about. Then you have
anyone specific? Any specific GM you have in mind?
Well, again, if you go down the list, of the bilingual guys that are kind of in the loop, Luongo's name has been thrown out there. Darsh's
Roberto Luongo.
It's going to be quite an interesting process, and I'm sure they're going to want to do it sooner or later, but it's going to have to wait until Jeff Gorton comes in and really, gets a feel for the organization. But anyways, it's really critical, I think, that they put some other people in place as far as their amateur and pro scouting goes, because those guys are critical. And you talk about player development. Well, I'll tell you what, player development is a lot easier when you make good selections in the draft. And, I've worked with some players and try to get them to the next level. And it's a difficult task. It can be done. But the bottom line is you have to try and find good guys that make it a lot easier to develop those guys when they have good character and good skill set. And that's something that, they've been hit and miss over the course of his tenure. And hopefully they'll address it with some new, fresh ideas and fresh blood. And, this is going to be interesting to see, what he decides to do and when he decides to do it.
Yeah, hiring a GM, obviously, and hiring a director of scouting to replace Trevor Timmins are at the top of the list. But after that, if I'm the GM or if I'm Gorton, I'm sitting down with Carey Price and saying, we got to try and move you. We're going through a rebuild or whatever. Where would you be willing to go? and give me a list of teams you'd be willing to go to, and are you willing to move on? Like I would think at this point, Carey Price would be happy to, Geoff Molson talked about a fresh start for the team. I think Carey Price would be happy personally to get a fresh start after everything he's been through. The Canes would have to eat a big chunk of that contract to move him. But that's the first thing I'm doing is I'm sitting down with Carey Price and saying, okay, here's what my plan. Here's what we're going forward. I don't imagine you want to be part of this. We need to try and work. Give me a list of 5 teams or whatever you would go to, because he has that no movement clause. The next thing, after hearing Brendan Gallagher the other night.
I know where this is going.
I don't blame him. Brendan Gallagher's 29 years old. When he was asked, if it's a rebuild, are you interested in sticking around? And he talked about how much he loves Montreal, and I believe everything Brendan Gallagher said. He'd like to stay, but he's 29, and he says, the reason I play this game is to win. So I don't think Brendan Gallagher wants to be around for a rebuild. So that's the second guy I'm sitting down with and saying, do you want to stay here? Because if you're rebuilding, you still need a leader. I can't believe they didn't name Brendan Gallagher captain this season. So Brendan, do you want to stay here? Do you love Montreal enough to stay here? We're going to make you captain. We're going to make you leader of this. We're going to rebuild. It's going to hurt for a couple of years, but we want you to be part of this. If you don't want to be part of it, I think Brendan Gallagher has done enough in Montreal to deserve the right to maybe move on, and maybe they want to get rid of that contract anyway. But those are the two key guys that I think you got to sit down with first, decide what they want to do, where they want to go. And as I said, with me personally, if Gallagher is willing to go through the pain of the rebuild for a couple of years, he's a pretty good guy to put the C on his shirt and have him lead the way again, because he comes to play every night, no matter what the score is, no matter what's going on. So those are the two key guys I think you got to deal with moving forward.
And I think we also have to address Shea Weber. He was at the game this week. He flew in to see the team's doctor, but what's going on with his situation, that he's not ready to say that his playing career is over just yet. And it's kind of this weird sort of lingering storyline about the captain who's not really around the team, who might never play again, but might play again at a certain point, that I think it's kind of a time to close the book on him and move on. As they said, if they want a fresh start, they'll have to have a fresh start with a new captain. Now, something that Geoff Molson mentioned in the press conference was that the urgency to hire a new GM, obviously he wants it done sooner rather than later, but he's okay waiting to make sure that they have the right person in place. But I don't think realistically that will work. You're not going to have start hiring, a new person in charge of your pro scouting without the GM in place, without having him have a say in these people. That I think that the GM cannot wait till the offseason, cannot wait till, the new year, that it should be done before the Christmas break to have all this in order. So as much as they want to say that they can take their time, I think that it's something that they have to move quickly on.
And Marc Bergevin hinted that he had a plan for Shea Weber. Never what that plan is. Is there still a plan for Shea Weber? I mean, Shea Weber was in town the other night to see doctors. He still hasn't spoken to the media. I can't imagine the captain of any other sports or team in North America and any sport being in the position he's in, and we haven't heard a word from him. And I know Shea Weber hates talking to the media, and it's not his thing. And personally, I don't care if he talks to the media or not, but I think the fans would like to know what's going on with him. I think he's the captain of the team. He's a key part of this organization. We've silenced from him. We were talking about the silence from Geoff Molson before he came out the other day. I think at some point, even though he doesn't like talking to the media, it's part of the job. And especially when you're the captain of the team and you still have that C, I think fans would be interested in just knowing what's going on. Is there any hope that he might come back? Does he want to have a future with the team doing something else? I think there's a lot of questions that fans would like to know about Shea Weber moving forward. And they're still keeping him as a so-called captain, but he's back home in Kelowna, BC. He came in here. He's apparently had some doctor's appointments, sort of in and out, and he's gone and not to be seen again. He's not the real captain of the team. And I think the fact they haven't had a captain this year has hurt them.
And you touched on Brendan Gallagher as far as, giving him the C, and he's the kind of guy that you would like to have leading your team. But, Brendan Gallagher, he wants to win. And if he's going to be part of a so-called potential rebuild, it's going to be painful for him to be part of that. And I personally don't think after what he's done that he would vouch for, the pain that's going to be involved in trying to develop a winning organization. And he might look to go somewhere else where he has a chance to win a cup. And you can't knock him for that. He'll speak for himself. But I think the bottom line out of all these guys as they get older and the timeline starts to slim down, They want to get a real honest chance of playing with a winner and having a chance to win that almighty Stanley Cup.
One thing I'll say about Brendan Gallagher, I think he has like a modified no trade clause, and also I think an NMC as well. I think he can add like 6 teams to the 6 possible destinations he would like to be traded to. But even beyond that, like this is a guy who gets as banged up as he's banged up, and is in the first year of a 6-year deal worth $39 million. Just like the Canadiens are likely going to have to swallow money on Carey Price, I'm willing to bet they're probably going to have to swallow some money on Brendan Gallagher as well. The type of playing style that he has at the money that he signed for, I'd be stunned if you found any team who'd be willing to take on his contract wholeheartedly. They must love the guy. They love the passion, but that's a lot of money for a guy who can play in the middle of the lineup. I don't know if he'll be able to score 30 goals again. Just you'll be a good guy to kind of rile everybody up. But at the price tag that he has, I'd be stunned if you got somebody who could just take that contract that isn't the Arizona Coyotes.
I think there's teams out there that would take Brendan Gallagher. I
definitely agree with that. I'm not saying that they wouldn't. I just think yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
He scored a lot of goals on this team without a lot of help. You know, it's not like he was playing with a number 1 center, and he scored a lot of goals just because he's Brendan Gallagher and he goes to the dirty areas. And on a good team, if you have Brendan Gallagher as your second or third line winger on a really good team, and he can score 20, 25 goals, you know, that's and just the fact, the way he plays, the way he comes to play every game, I think other players on any team feed off of that.
We mentioned at the beginning of the episode stuff that more or less impressed us from the Geoff Molson press conference. You guys can list off some more of those things that impressed you, but I also am more interested in hearing some things that didn't impress you as much. Like for me, just to start, when Geoff Molson mentioned the idea of having more diversity in the organization, I thought his answer to that question was a little vague. I mean, diversity could mean anything you want it to mean. Like, I don't necessarily think he provided as much context to that as he could have. I also think some of the answers for the Logan Mailloux situation when it was brought up was also dissatisfactory. But I'm also curious from what everyone else has to say about this.
Yeah, Julian, the 2 things you pointed out, those are really the only 2 things I thought weren't impressive. But he said that he was very vague on what that meant. When he was talking about diversity, and somebody asked him, "Well, what do you mean?" And he didn't really have a great answer to it. It's the one answer I don't think he was. And the fact that he put it out there, like he's the one who put out the team's going to work more on diversity, but that was the answer. It was very vague. As you said, in the Logan Mailloux thing, he obviously wants that just to go away at this point, right? He's fed up of answering it. You wonder how much that played into Timmins and Bergevin leaving. I mean, I remember asking Trevor Timmins the day after the news conference. I tried to ask the question the night of the draft, but I wasn't selected to had my hand up, but they didn't pick me, which is sort of the Canadiens' way. They used to try and control the message with Paul Wilson. But the next day when I asked Trevor Timmins, did Geoff Molson sign off on this? And he basically said he signs off on everything. But it was sort of a weird answer. So you wonder, like, Molson obviously, like I mentioned earlier, like they have meetings before the draft for like weeks. Like they didn't all of a sudden out of thin air decide they were going to draft Logan Mailloux. They must have had going into it, if he's available, we're going to take him. So, Molson didn't really want to answer that. But from his viewpoint, I sort of understand that was a real black mark on the Canadiens as an organization. It didn't look good. How they were so out of touch with society today that they didn't think there would be a big backlash from that is really shocking to me. But apart from that, everything Geoff Molson did in that news conference really impressed me. He was prepared. He was very thoughtful in his answers. He was calm. He answered every question. I had been told by a source that Gary Bettman played a role in Jeff Gorton being hired and was highly recommended by Gary Bettman. And I asked Molson that question, and I wondered how he would answer it. And he answered it honestly. He answered saying, I talked with Gary Bettman about a lot of things. And I spoke with him about Jeff Gorton. And why wouldn't I? Because he was in the New York market and he worked for NHL Network, and Gary Bettman knew a lot about him. So as I said, those are the only 2 things, Julian. And as I said, he impressed me, and it made me wonder why he didn't do that with the Logan Mailloux situation, like the day after, and get ahead of it and handle questions at that point. But again, the Canadiens were caught off guard with that Logan Mailloux thing, and I think that's a big reason why Paul Wilson was among the people who were fired on the weekend.
Yeah, it kind of felt like this whole season was a runaway train, and you're kind of like, when is this ever going to be put to an end? And then after Geoff Molson had his press conference, that it was like, okay, we now understand what direction this team is going in. You know, there is now some structure put in place, and it is not the Wild West that's been going on with this team since the start of the season. And yeah, the big thing that was disappointing is that word diversity has kind of turned into a buzzword, and you can just throw it out there. But if you have no real description behind what it means to you and what you want to see from your organization when it comes to diversity, now just speaking from a female point of view, after they drafted Logan Mailloux and they tried to do the big damage control, they said they're going to hire more women who have a position of power when it comes to the hockey decisions, not just, people who are accountants or things like that, that women who played hockey and who can be brought in. Like if you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, they've had Haley Wickenheiser for years. She brought in Danielle Goyette. Julie Chu, who coaches the Concordia Stingers team, was flown down to Tampa Bay by Julien Brisebois to be a special guest at their training camp. And the Canadiens haven't done any of that. It's been 5 months since they said that. Geoff Molson said it again this week during his press conference. Why is it taking so long for them to be able to bring someone in? And when they talk about possible GMs, I don't think they're going to name the first ever female GM in the NHL, but someone that should be looked at is Emily Castonguay, who's the best agents in the league right now. She represents Alexis Lafreniere. I've spoken to her before, and even I ran into Donald Fear after I wrote an article about her for CBC Sports, and he said, you know what, she's really someone to watch. She's up and coming in the hockey world, very well respected, but that should be someone the Canadiens are targeting, not because she's a woman, because she's very qualified for the job. And if you want to bring the diversity, and it shouldn't be taking 5 months to try and figure out if you can bring a woman into this organization.
I thought Jeff did a really nice job. Like Stu had mentioned, a lot of more positives. Yes, the diversity question was very vague in the way he handled it. But, I think he made a real statement in saying we're looking for a fresh start. We're looking for two people in the hockey operations to make decisions, not one. He's looking at a medical performance team to head up the organization, to look at players with, anxiety or, any type of mental health issues. So these things are, in today's world is a real big factor in trying to get a real grasp on where they want to go as an organization. And I think there's more positives, than any type of negatives that Jeff brought forward. And now it's going to be just a matter of time to see how these different comments that he made are implemented. And, it's going to take some time because there's a lot of questions to be answered. There's a lot of people to be put in place. And Jeff Gorton's desk will have an awful pile of papers when he does arrive and try and dissect which way he wants to go.
Yeah. And just, you mentioned, I'd be very surprised I don't think the Canes are going to hire a female GM. I'd be surprised if they don't hire a female assistant GM or someone just below the GM in some kind of a role, whether it's assistant GM or something to do with scouting. I'd be very surprised if they don't do that moving forward. And Rick, you brought up a good point when Geoff Molson talked about how focusing more on helping the players 24/7 off the ice also. Rick, you played in this market, and that was before social media, and you know what it's like. And with social media and everything else, I go back to Carey Price when he first came and joined the Canadiens. Here's a kid who was like 18, 19 years old from a very, very small community out in BC, put into the bright lights of the big city and left on his own. Like, how is he not living with another player or even Bob Gainey or somebody to just bring a kid in and throw him into that spotlight is like, you're asking for a disaster. And, you look at Sidney Crosby, lived with Mario Lemieux for I don't know how many years when he went to Pittsburgh, and the spotlight in Pittsburgh is not nearly as bright as a spotlight in Montreal. So that's something I think moving forward, they have to learn, like with these young players. And, Jonathan Drouin had his issues with anxiety and that, and playing in this market, man, it's hard. I mean, I can't even imagine that. I mean, imagine everywhere you go, you can't go anywhere. You can't go do groceries. You can't go for dinner. You can't go anywhere without everybody knowing who you are. And the difference from when Rick played, everybody didn't have a camera in their pocket. And it's a different, like these guys, I remember Carey Price talking about how he, years ago, he was afraid to go out and do groceries. He felt like he was a hermit just living in his house. He was afraid to go out. And it's surprising to me it's taken this long for the Canadiens to address that situation. And thankfully they have. I mean, the world's changing. I think the Canadiens got slapped in the face how much the world is changing. I think they thought they were going to draft Logan Mayo, and there may be a little bit, for a day, people will be upset and like, don't worry about it, it'll blow over, and it didn't. And so they're learning as they move along very slowly. But that was a real thing. That was a good takeaway for me from that thing, is that they're realizing these players, we got to, when they leave the practice rink in Brossard, we have to be concerned about where they're going, what they're doing, and we have to have the resources there to help them. And when it does get to be too much, when like when Carey Price was saying, I'm afraid to go out and do groceries, like somebody has to sit down with you at that point. So go ahead, Rick.
I was just going to say, listen, I came into this environment at 26 years old, and it was tough enough for me to make that adjustment back then with, the limited amount of social media stuff that was going on. So now, today, with all the stuff that's happening, these young kids, I tell you what, it is a tough goal for them from a maturity standpoint to be scrutinized the way they're scrutinized on a daily basis. And some of the kids need some help, and help them mature through this process to handle it the right way. And it's a challenge. And I really believe that it's a move that's going to be nothing but beneficial to so many of these young kids, and helping them handle some up and downs that you experience as a professional athlete. And like I said before, hats off to Geoff Molson for identifying and coming forward with saying, listen, this is an area that we'd like to bring in, and I think it's a really good situation that he's going to address it and help these kids out.
Yeah, no, back in my younger single days, I was downtown a lot, and you'd see Chris Chelios, and you'd see Shane Corson, you'd maybe even see Rick Green. You'd see these guys in the bars having a good time, and nobody really thought anything about it. Or maybe somebody would buy him a beer, or you'd laugh, or you'd joke. But today it's different. Today in that situation, people would be taking pictures. It would be on social media. The Canadiens are losing because Rick Green and Chris Chelios were in the bar last night, and here's the pictures of them. And it's changed so much. I remember when Bob Gainey was here for when they had that night for all the captains, and I was asking him, I did an interview with him, I asked him, what's changed so much from when you played? And he told me he had a great day. He said when he came here as GM, he realized the guys don't go out anymore. And, in the old days, after practice, I used to go to the tavern across the street at Alexis Nino Plaza from the Forum. Everybody knew all the Canadiens players would be there. And like I said, when in my younger days, you'd see them downtown. And Gainey said to me, it took me a while to figure out, did they not go out because they don't want to go out? Or did they not go out because they can't go out? And it's more the latter. They can't. Like they just the tension on them is so bright. And I said, everybody's got a camera in their pocket, and they're so focused on them. And that's got to be really, really tough mentally. And it's changed so much from the past. Like I'm sure, Rick, when you guys used to go out, you didn't worry like, the fans are going to see us. It was like you just went out and you had a good time, and the fans had a good time with you. And it's really changed since then.
And we were fortunate enough to go out and talk about last night's win, or the last 15 wins, or all of the winning things. Now, when the team is struggling, hey, listen, you don't want to go anywhere because people are wanting to take a swipe at you, and you
just want to stay at home.
And the
fans are ready to slap you on the back, right, Rick, and have a drink with you and celebrate the fact you guys were doing so well.
Yeah. So,
Jess, do you want the last word here?
Well, I was just going to say, even just look what happened to the Ottawa Senators not that long ago when they were in Arizona, of all places, in an Uber cab ride, and the camera was rolling, and he only figured out that they were NHL players from their conversation in that league. So, it is a completely different world. And that is why, Geoff Molson has to have new people in place that understand what it's like, that they have this new philosophy to be able to help these new age of players. And it can't be just, the old school guys running the organization.
And Hoffman was in that Uber ride. And
Chris Weidman was in there too.
Yeah,
well, actually, Chris Weidman was there. Was Mike Hoffman in there? I know Chris Weidman.
Oh no, sorry, Weidman. Sorry, I'm mistaken.
Chris Weidman was in there. Mike Hoffman was not an Ottawa Senator. Mike Hoffman had his other issues with the Ottawa Senators.
No, Weidman was in that Uber ride.
Chris Weidman was there.
And there's another example, like who hasn't been out with their coworkers in an Uber or a bar and talked about, my boss is this or this is that, or complain about work. That's what people do. And that's what these guys were doing. And you're right, Julian, it's only after the Uber driver found out that they were pro athletes, and I guess he didn't like the tip they left them or something, he decided, I'm going to screw these guys.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any complaints about either of you guys privately or publicly. That's good to know. This has been another riveting edition of the Hockey Inside Out show. Man, I can't wait to see who the next GM is going to be for this team, because we are going to do a whole set of questions on whoever that person is, whether it's Emily Castonguay, whether it's Danny Briere, whether it's Mathieu Darche, whether it's Martin Matten Jr., whether it's Patrick Roy. Serious if you want to take that or not. Subscribe to the YouTube page, subscribe to the Hockey Inside Out newsletter, and visit hockeyinsideout.com to watch full episodes and read all the other interesting stuff. Hey, maybe Brendan Kelly will write an article about why Patrick Roy should be GM of the Montreal Canadiens.